Actually, Worker works by using command line arguments to your applications. And if you're a programmer, for instance, you write your own C, C++, Fortran programs or R script, then you don't do command line arguments because you hate them. Okay, you can understand that, but no worries, there's an app for that. It's called Parameter Weaver. So this is just an interlude, because of course Parameter Weaver does not particularly depend on Worker, or vice versa. You can use them independently, but in the context of Worker, Parameter Weaver can be useful. So dealing with command line arguments and configuration files is boring. It's not nice to program. It's also error prone, in the sense that if you don't do it correctly, you might have some unpleasant surprises. And it's also pretty fragile, unless you do it right. So basically, Parameter Weaver, it takes just a parameter description file. And again, this is a comma-separated value file. So what it contains is the parameter type, the name, and the default value for each parameter. And then it generates data structures and functions to easily access, on the one hand, command line argument, but also parameters in configuration files, and you can mix and match those. So that's actually rather convenient. And it works for C, C++, Fortran and R. If you're using Python, just use argparse or config parser, which are in the standard library and which are actually very good. So it is based on code generation. That means there are no dependencies and no libraries. You just generate some additional C++ or Fortran or R code, and you can use that in your project. So let's take a C example. And basically the parameter file is just a text file, it's a CSV file. And as you can see, the first column denotes the type, the second the name, and the third the default value. Of course, the last value is actually a Boolean value, but in C that would again be an integer, 0 being false, anything else being true. So code generation is fairly straightforward. You load the Parameter Weaver module and you weave to target language C, so that's the -L C, and the description is -d params.txt. And that will create a number of files: clparams.c, clparams.h, clparams.aux.c, and .h. And those contain the function definitions and the function declarations, the data structure definitions, which you need in order to work with those parameters. So in your C code, you would use you would include the clparams.h file, and that defines a structure, params. So basically that will be used in order to store your command line arguments or your configuration file values. And you initialize that using the initcl function, and then you can parse command line arguments using parsecl. And for instance, then you can start using them. If, for instance, there's a parameter called verbose, and yes, there was one, because that was what we defined in our description file, then we can use dumpcl to actually list the values of all the parameters on, in this case, standard error, using hash space in order to separate them as a prefix in the output. And then you can use any other parameters using the params structure, and at the end of the day you would finalize the params in order just not to have any memory leaks. You can just use finalize CL. So some features of Parameter Weaver. For C, C++, and for Fortran, it will support all basic data types. So for C, C++, int, float, double, character, and character star. For Fortran, it would support integer, real, double precision, characters with certain lengths, and logical. parameters can be specified on the command line or in a configuration file, and all parameters can have default values.